Hey friends, Roman Carrollton here. Today I'm going to show you how to build this awesome 5-point star, which is a great part of our Christmas display here at the Carrollton Ranch. This thing is super easy to build out of 1/2-inch PVC electrical conduit, a white rope, and some nuts and bolts. A little bit of spray paint. I think anybody can build this thing. Now I'm kind of serious about the average Joe being able to build this thing. We've all seen YouTube DIY videos where everything's going great and you're excited about the project right up to the point where they pull out a plasma cutter or an arc welder or some tool that the average Joe doesn't have in his house. Well, I think we'll be able to build this thing with the average tools. Here's what you're going to need. A measuring tape. You're going to need some way to cut the PVC pipe, whether that be with a handsaw or a PVC cutter. And you have to have some way to put holes in the thing, which means a drill and some drill bits. That's about it.
Let's look at the materials needed to build your star. First up is a piece of light rope. You need 18 feet of lit length. It can be any color you want, LED or incandescent. The frame is made out of 1/2-inch PVC conduit. It's called 1/2-inch even though the size is actually closer to 7/8. This comes in 10-foot sticks and you'll need 3 pieces of that. The fasteners are all 1/4-20. The bolts are 2 inches long and that's 2 inches under the head. You need 8 of those. You'll need 2 eye bolts, again 1/4-20, at least 2 inches of threaded shank. 2 of those. And some 1/4-20 nuts to hold all those bolts together. A dozen ought to do you. The last 2 items is a can of flat black spray paint and a bunch of cable ties, nylon zip ties, whatever you want to call them, to hold the light rope to the frame.
Now let's talk about the conduit for a minute. This stuff comes in 10-foot lengths. Obviously this one's been cut down a little bit so it'll fit in the camera. But one end of the conduit is straight and the other end has this bell on it. It's real important when you make the first couple of measurements that you measure from the little end toward the big end. If you do that, everything's going to come out alright. Remember to put your measuring tape on the small end of the electrical conduit, and you want to make your first mark at 58 1/2 inches. Make another mark at 117 inches, which is 58 1/2 inches past your first mark. Now that's going to get close to the bell end of the pipe, but that's okay because that piece is going to be scrap. Now that you've got your conduit marked, it's time to cut it to length. And you can always use a handsaw on this PVC. That works great. Nothing wrong with it. But if you're a tool geek, use this as an opportunity to go out and get one of these handy dandy PVC cutting tools. They're pretty easy to work. You pull the jaws open. It has this ratchet action that closes the cutting blade each time you squeeze the handle. And they work really great. I'll demonstrate here on this piece of scrap. Just be sure to keep your fingers out of the way of this because I think you'd go through them pretty easily. But just 3 or 4 squeezes and there you go. It's cut right through. It's a nice clean cut with no burrs. You don't have to go back and clean up anything. It's ready to go. Well, maybe at this point some of you are wondering why you've ended up with 6 pieces of conduit when the star only needs 5, and you're beginning to question old Roman here that he can't count. Well, you're going to end up with an extra piece no matter how you cut it, right? And by going ahead and cutting it to length, you got an extra piece just in case you screw up later on. But I got faith in you.
Each piece of conduit needs 4 holes drilled in it. Let's mark where those 4 holes go. Make your first mark 1 inch from the end. Move on down and make a mark at 22 1/8 inches. Move on down and make your next mark at 36 7/8 inches. The 4th hole goes 1 inch from the other end.
Now it's time to drill the holes in your conduit. This is the trickiest part of the whole process because the conduit tends to roll around on you. You'll have the first hole straight up and down. When you go to drill your second hole, the conduit may have rotated on you and you may not have noticed, and so you end up having one hole that goes this way and the next hole is going to be at an angle, and when you go to assemble this, it's just not going to work. So here's an easy way to get around that. We've drilled the first hole out at 1/4 of an inch. And now take your longest 1/4 screw that you got, it needs to be all thread, and put it in the hole and run a nut down on it to hold it in place. You know, they never spin down fast when the camera's rolling and your battery is running low. So there we have it. Finger tight's good. Now what you have is an indicator that shows you what direction that hole goes through the conduit. And now the rest of your holes are a snap to drill. You just make sure your screw is straight up and down, and then make sure your drill's straight up and down, and then drill your holes. Now we're using an 1/8 inch for the pilot bit, and we're going to come back, the finished size is 5/16 of an inch. That's going to allow plenty of slop for the 1/4 fasteners when you go for final assembly. Don't forget to come back and bring this hole up to 5/16 of an inch. You do this, everything's going to be perfect. Now that you have your pieces cut out, it's time for assembly. And I wish I could show you from scratch, but I only have the one prototype. So we just have to walk through how to put this thing together. It's really easy. Start with 2 pieces, stand them up, and fasten them at the top to make an upside down V. Take a 3rd piece and run it horizontally, making the connections here in the middle. From this point, it's just a matter of connecting in the last 2 pieces to make your star outline. Now these last 2 pieces, where they make junctions here, some of them might go over and some might go under the other piece. Either way is fine, it's not going to matter. Remember that 2 of your bolts need to be eye bolts. Now on the prototype, I've got one up here at the top, and I've got another one down here in the corner. Now you do-it-yourselfers out there, you certainly don't need me telling you how to put a nut and a bolt together, but I am going to offer this tidbit. When you go to put these things together, the nut's tightening up against plastic, and that's going to deform. You're never really going to get this nut tight. So if you have it, now's a good time to put a little drop of thread locker on these threads before you run the nut down. I think that's especially important on the eye bolt that you're going to be using on a couple of spots here. You're putting a lot of time and effort into building this thing, and this little step will ensure it'll stay together for many years. Now that you've got all your bolts in, it's time to get out the flat black spray paint and give it a good coat. Now that you have your star painted, it's time to put the light rope on. And on the prototype, I started at the far end away from the plug-in side of the light rope. And I fastened it about 6 inches down from the top using a cable tie, and I started running it up and over the top of the star. The cable tie holds it down on either side of the junction, and as I went along, I found that a cable tie at the top, middle, and bottom of each span was sufficient to hold it. Just keep working the light rope around the perimeter of the star, being careful to keep it on the outside of the frame, meaning that if you look at the perimeter, you want the light rope to be on the outside of the perimeter. So it's always exposed, no matter if you look at the star from the front or the back. This way it shows up from either side, and it really looks fantastic. When you come up to the end of the light rope, you may have a little bit of overlap like I do here. Just be careful to keep the 2 pieces next to each other, and nobody will ever notice. The first year I had the star hanging up, I could see the last little bit of cord going up to the extension cord. It's white, and the light rope illuminated it quite well. I found it distracting, so I took some black electrical tape and just covered that up. Now you don't see it at all. It's an extra step that you may not find necessary, especially if you can find a cord that's not white. Now let's talk about displaying the star. You might be lucky and be able to hang this thing on the front of your house where it can be seen from your street. Me, I'm not so lucky. You can't see the ranch house from the highway, but I do have this awesome tree out by the highway with a limb about 30 feet up. So that's how I hang it. Now on the prototype, I ended up with the power cord coming off at the same point where the eye bolt is for the top of the star, which means my power cord has to go up and over the limb and down to the star. The one advantage of this is there's not much weight here on this connection and it doesn't pull loose. The disadvantage is the cord's got to go up to the limb and down the other side, and that eats up some extension cord. I'm not sure if I build this again, I'm going to take it off the top. I may bring it off the very bottom of the star right in the middle. Anyway, if you go this route, just remember that when you pull the star up, to put weight on the rope and not so much on the extension cord. You do not want to load the extension cord with the weight of the star. And as you can see, it doesn't take much of a rope to hold this thing up. Friends, I appreciate y'all taking a minute to watch this how-to video. I wish you a lot of success when you go to build your own. Till next time, this is Roman Carrollton. We'll see ya.